Flashes of memory.
I'm gonna preface this by saying I went to boarding school for 6 years. This boarding school was in the middle of a one-stop light town and on a hill 800 feet up. The school used to be an old monastery. It was hundreds of years old and huge. 4 stories, including a basement where there was a boiler room and long hallways. Not all of these stories happened to myself, but the people who told me them were reliable enough to believe. Also, the school didn't want us telling stories to other people because they were afraid that it would make them not want to go to the school due to it being haunted. The first one happened to me. I used to be in charge of cleaning the gymnasium at night. Every student had a job that they had to do either at night or in the morning to help take care of the school. Taught you some practical things and all. Anywho, I was there by myself that night getting ready to start sweeping the gym. The gym had 2 floors to it. The upstairs part was the weightlifting area, and you could see it fully from the bottom part of the gym where the basketball court was. As I stepped into the gym, one of the basketballs starts rolling a bit. I look around to see if any doors are open. None are. I chalk it up to randomness, but see that it is continuing to roll. As I watch it, it makes a full circle around the entire gym and stops right next to my feet. At this point, I'm a bit scared, but figured it was nothing. I heard a creaking coming from the 2nd floor and look up. There is a girl there just staring right at me. As soon as I made direct eye contact with her, she bolts to the stairs that would take her to me. She let out a scream that I cannot describe. I was terrified and froze in place. Thankfully, she didn't come to me, but took a left and bolted through the main doors of the gym. They didn't open. She just went right through them. I noped the hell out of there. There was a chapel that was in the middle of the school, really. This is a non-religious school, so we used it for musical performances and all that sort of stuff. I was in choir for the years that I was there, so I was very used to performing in it. There was stained glass on all of the windows and such. Every time you walked in there, it always felt as if someone was watching you. It wasn't only me, but there were multiple people who felt that way. There was a big grand piano that was on the opposite side of where you walked in. That was our stage. People would go in there at night and practice on it or just play for fun. Most people would just go in there and only turn on the stage lights and leave the rest off while they were practicing. This story isn't something that I witnessed, but a friend of mine. She was playing on the piano by herself and just having fun practicing. While in the middle of a song, the keys next to her start going up and down as if trying to add another part to her song. She jokingly said, "Hey, stop. That doesn't go with what I am doing." She immediately felt as if someone has boxed her ears, and she became really dizzy. She freaked out and bolted out of there. She came crying down to the area where all of the students hung out on their free time. She told myself and a few friends the story, and took quite a while to get her to calm down. Many people have seen a girl in a white dress constantly roaming that area. Another was that the high school of the school was on the highest floor of the building. One night, one of the seniors was studying late trying to graduate. He was working on something at about 3 a.m., and one of the window blinds started flickering. You know that noise blinds make when wind goes through them quickly. He thinks nothing of it until it starts happening on the other side of the room. This is a huge room. It fits over 200 students in it. He goes over to the window to close it. He finds that it isn't open. He laughs and thinks he must just be really tired. He goes back to continue studying, and a blind on the other side of the room starts going. Then another and another, until all of them are going. There are about 30 plus windows on the top floor. He said he just stood there dazed about the whole situation, until all of them just stopped at the same time. He left his stuff out and ran to his dorm room. His roommate said he looked like he had seen a ghost. Another job I had around the school was preparing the salad bar we had for lunch and dinner. To do this, I would have to get out everything we would need for the day from the basement in the giant freezer we had down there. I would then have to wash it and cut, peel everything. I was one of the first people up every morning to do this job. I would get up at about 6 a.m. to do this every day. I hated having to go into the giant fucking freezer on my own when no one else was up, and it was pitch black outside. It was one of the few things I never liked doing. The reason for this is this story. I got up at about 6 o'clock. As soon as I woke up, I was feeling uneasy. I quickly took my shower and got dressed so I could get to the lunchroom at about 6:30. The person in charge of the kitchen was already up and getting everything warmed up. I said hello and checked out what we would need. I made a list and headed down. Now that feeling of uneasiness was there the whole time. Through my whole shower, walking the dark hallways in the morning, and even when I got to the kitchen. I opened the freezer and felt the cold blast of air. Needless to say, I could have cut diamonds with how cold it was. I stepped inside and started getting vegetables. As I was reaching for one, I heard a giggle. This wasn't a normal one, but like a small child's giggle. I instantly froze and whipped around. No one. I brushed it off and continued. Another giggle. I was like, no fucking way. This is not happening to me. Flick, lights go off in the freezer. I still had a bit of light because I left the door open. I start seeing the door close and it locks from the outside. I bolt for the door because I knew I would be locked in there for at least 15 minutes with the lights off if I didn't. I caught it right before it closed. Again, I hear the giggle. This time, it was right behind me. I screamed. I was 17 and screamed like a girl. I ran upstairs, told the guy I wasn't feeling well, and went and hid in my room till everyone else got up that morning. This is a brief account of an experience I had almost a year ago in the warehouse where I work alone. No one I've told has believed me, but perhaps you all will. I work in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for 25% of its cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to be rid of it. It is in the middle of Mennonite country with no neighbors for a half-mile around. Look out the window. You see cornfields and scraggly trees. Cell service? Forget about it. I work here alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. To get to the front office, you must go through a hallway from the main warehouse, into a secondary office, and then through another door into the front. I frequently hear bumps and thuds and occasionally will go into the warehouse and feel air movement, but I've always attributed it to drafts and animal life in the roof. The only thing that has ever made me uneasy about the building is the fact that all of the door locks are reversed. Whoever installed those locks didn't intend to keep people out. They intended to keep something in. I was in the front office when I began to hear the thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply masking tape to the door I was working on. But this time, it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself that it was just a pissed-off raccoon or squirrel that had found its way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. The door to the secondary office had been open. It sounded like it had violently slammed shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was now closed. I tried to logic it through in my head that a strong draft had sucked it closed, although I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again, close this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure of what was happening. My eyes locked on the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open. Wider, wider. Nothing there. Nothing visible, no air movement, just quiet. So quiet. A quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick I couldn't breathe. The quiet was shattered when the screech came again. This time it was clearly human. Pained, angered, and emanating from the main warehouse. The door slammed. That entirely broke my frozen, fearful state. I ran. I got into my car and drove until I was in cell range to call my father. He didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. Fast forward half an hour. My dad and I met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it was separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds, the screeching, and the sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that we should check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led the way. Something you should know about this warehouse: it was formerly a furniture manufacturing place owned by a Mennonite farmer. They made handmade chairs, tables, etc. Because of all the cutting that went on, the floor is thickly coated with dust. We walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The dust was untouched. The doors were closed. Windows were locked. The only thing out of the ordinary was one of the hanging fluorescent light fixtures. It was hanging askew and swaying slightly. Insisting we take a look at the mount to ensure it didn't just break loose, my dad grabbed a stepladder. He supported it while I climbed up and grabbed the swinging light. I looked on top of the light and saw a handprint. A single, fresh, inhumanly large handprint. No footprints in the dust around the light. No signs of a presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What the hell? There's been no one in here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd been suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts from the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe me that this wasn't human, that something wasn't right here. The last thing he said was, "Nothing is here. Next time, just go back to work." And then, as if to show its presence, the thud returned. This time, it wasn't just a thud, but more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screech. The awful, awful screech. It felt it like was coming from the walls themselves. We ran. And I haven't returned. My father hired someone to finish my job, and has since moved into the office. He's heard the thudding, but thus far nothing has happened further. What actually happened? I don't know, nor do I ever care to know. What I do know is that there is something paranormal in that building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself, or the feeling of the deafening silence. I was on a college ghost hunt with a guy named Chris Fleming. Cool dude, we did all the normal college ghost hunt stuff, walking to supposedly haunted dorms and experiencing some cool stuff, but nothing crazy. The city we were in had this special place called the Ghost Trestle. It was basically a railroad bridge in the middle of a cornfield that had a dirt road underneath it. Anyways, during the ghost hunt with this guy who was actually featured on Ghost Adventures, we told him about this place. He was pumped and rushed through the rest of the college ghost hunt. Him and his assistant and a few of my friends took 2 cars with all his equipment to this ghost trestle. When we got there, a train was coming, so he interviewed us on camera to tell the story about this place. The story. Back a long time ago, there was a farmhouse. Still there but rebuilt, and a farmer, his wife and son escaped a fire in the house. Also on fire was the horse stables. The farmer ran in to try and rescue the horse before they succumbed to the fire, while the wife and son went to wave down a train that was passing by. The story ends with the farmer dying in the stable fire, and as the wife and child were waving down the train, they were struck and killed. To this day, if you park your car under the bridge while a train crossed you above, it's supposed to open up another dimensional world to be able to communicate. Well, we show up, and of course, to our luck, there is a train coming. We all freaked out and got pumped while the medium Chris Fleming attempted to communicate. We were all taking pictures and began to experience weird technological failures. My camera, which was my own, began flashing and taking multiple pictures. The same thing was occurring with our disposable camera Chris Fleming's assistant had. At one point, we began to see stuff mostly out of the corner of our eyes, and Chris attempted to communicate. But whatever spirit was there seemed more intimidated. Chris believed it to be the spirit of the little boy. We would every now and then see a figure poking its head out from behind a concrete wall under the tracks. It seemed like it was playing hide and seek. I can honestly say that I was young and thought this stuff was hoax and just fun for college kids to pretend. Until this night when we had a real professional experience the same thing we all did. Fast forward to a year or two after this event. I came to this same place for the first time since the night we went with Chris Fleming. This time it was just me and my then girlfriend. I parked under the bridge, turned off the car and lights, and took the key out of the ignition. We were joking together about how we were getting too old for this stuff, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a black shadow flash by the rear window of my car, followed by some noises that sounds like someone running towards my car. My heart never raced so fast to put my key into the ignition and peel out and get out of there. Whatever it was didn't seem like it wanted us there, and I have yet to drive under or by the bridge since. Thanks for listening to this stories to the end. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Flashes of Memory publishes a new story.